I was listening to your introduction, I was thinking something that, honestly, it's not very, a really clear topic to me, this relationship between art and rupture, because I don't think that artists possess a peculiar power to foresee the future. I don't think they are clairvoyant, or they are as much as other categories can maybe see the next breach. I don't know, like janitors, like carpenters, like designers, like professors. I don't think that artists or art people have this kind of power. And also, I was thinking about thinking of the artist as magician. I know, of course, what you mean, but it's really dangerous, especially in terms of the post-colonial debate, with all the debate that happened in the 80s around this Magicien de la Terre exhibition. But so I think my question is not really what artists can do, but what we can do with art, which is a slightly different question. And I think we can take it from two different perspectives. The first perspective is something that came to my mind, reminding a book that was recently published by Art and Multitude, which is a series of letters that Tony Negri wrote around the theme of art in the 80s. And it's quite funny because it was writing in the 80s that was a very hard time for social movements in Italy. I mean, there was repression, jail, heroin, you know, after the long tide of 68, 77, there was really like a difficult and hard time for social movements. And also on the theoretical and art level, it was not an easy scenario. So there was the postmodern thought, which was having a strong hegemony, all the rhetorics about the end of history and so on, things that we perfectly know. And on a global level, the Italian artists that were having success were the transavanguardia. Oh my God, you know, people that say, oh, finally I can paint again, so I like it, it's beautiful, has no political meaning, the ideology of the betrayal, and so on. And it was interesting enough that for Tony Negri, art is a kind of consolatory function. When there's nothing else, he goes back to art. You see, okay, politics sucks, philosophy sucks, okay, then I go back to art. But apart from this aspect of the book, I think he wrote something which is a clear indication in general of what art can do in terms of its relationship with rupture. He was talking about abstract art, and he said that abstract art was really in the first half of the 20th century was to prove that the multitudes could really look in the eyes the contradiction of their times, meaning they could answer the level of the capitalistic abstraction, which was basically the industrialization, which was basically the becoming, the loss of specificity of labor, which created a series of crises in social movements, and the tool through which the multitudes could really answer, and in a way give an interpretation of this level of capitalistic abstraction was abstraction in art. So I think this is very, very important. So art as a tool to really look straight in the eye the contradictions of our time. And I think this is something that artists, curators should always bear in mind. And this is also what we had in mind last May. You mentioned it, Luis, when we titled this kind of meetings and action, we titled it Abstrike, which was the union of two different words, abstract and strike. So of course there was a bit of humor. But the idea was, okay, we had the strike, then there is the social strike, then how do we answer to the next level of capitalistic abstraction, which is financialization of economy? We need an abstract strike, okay? And also how art can be a tool in this multitudinary political process to answer on the level of the capitalistic attack. So, and art can be an important tool in this process together with other levels. So I think we always have to think in terms of outside disciplinary boundaries. I think this is very important. Another thing, and I'm closing, so completely changing the perspective. So in August, we were asked as Saledocs to go to take part in a seminar at the Biennale, so really in the core of the Biennale at the arena in the central pavilion, which was organized by Gal Faber, and the title was Who Need Museums and Biennales? And I was thinking, what can we do with art? So first of all, this first thing, we can use art as a tool to look straight in the eyes the contradictions of our time without nostalgia, without going back to past conditions that will never come back. Second thing, we can subvert art. I mean, this is really I think something that we are trying to do all the time when we think of our labor conditions, for example, as people working in the art field or in cultural industry or in creative industries. But this is extremely difficult. And so I was going to speak at the Biennale, and I just read some history of the Biennale. And this is a very well-known story, but in '68, like everywhere in the world, there were protests in Venice. And the Biennale was stormed by protesters. So there were demonstrations, there were clashes with the police. Some artists reacted in solidarity, like withdrawing their works from the exhibition. Others exhibited their painting, turning them over, and so on. But what happened after the protest? The Biennale, exactly like 4 years later, in 1973, entered in a radical process of reform of its statute, which was the one written by the fascists at the time. And it was incredible, the transformation of the Biennale as an institution. There was a new president that was appointed, it was Carlo Ripa di Meana, and the level of the modification of these institutions today is something that we cannot even imagine. For example, in 1974, he cancelled the traditional Biennale, and instead there was kind of a public festival throughout the whole city of Venice, which was all in solidarity with Chile, which was the victim of the coup d'etat by Pinochet, for example. In '76, there was one of the first exhibitions of the Spanish artists after the death of Franco. '77, there was the so-called biennial of dissent. That means a biennial of Eastern European or artists from those countries that were critical towards the USSR, for example. And the left party in Italy really criticized a lot, for example, this exhibition. So what we have to gain back, if we want to be really actors of rupture, is this possibility to change art as an institution, to change the languages, to change what we mean through this word that we use, that is art, but also to change the architecture of the institutions. And this is completely, of course, this is very, very difficult. It is very difficult because our institutions now work really as governmental devices. Art institutions, creative industry, cultural industries work through the mobilization of our differences, of our radical imageries, of our radical thoughts. Of course, I mean, post-colonialism is very important, but it was the topic of last year Biennale. I mean, it's not a news. I mean, Opi and Weser, which is one of the superstars of the global art scene, was one of the main actors in bringing this post-colonial discourse at the center of the global art institution. So, and at the same time, all the criticalities can be hosted within these events, within these biennales, but let's say the architecture of the institutions is very rigid. The Biennale of Venice, for example, as an institution, it has nothing to do with, you know, post-Fordist flexible institution. It's hyper-rigid, it's hierarchical, you know. It's a place where you have employees that really follow very vertical chains of command, and at the same time, it hosts the most critical artists, imaginary discourses really within. So, again, going back to some classic workerist or post-operaist received, that is important to be against from within. I think that we are within as critical voices, and I think it is right that we are within, because we of course we can take advantage of the space that these institutions are allowing us to have, but at the same time we really have to think how to be against in a more effective way. This is one of the reasons why we occupied Sale Docs, because in Italy, for example, all the networks that gather artists or cultural workers or people who work within the creative industries now have, maybe they have strong critical instances, but at the same time, none of them pose the theme of being non-compatible with the neoliberal frame. And this is something that we are terribly missing as cultural workers, as people, as artists, and so on. So that's why I think we have this two different needs. The first need is the one to have these monstrous institutions, and Sale again it is an attempt to build a monster institution, something that can be a place for cultural production following different processes than the neoliberal official or institutional spaces for cultural productions. But at the same time, we have the problem of the politicization of let's call it with a very bad word, the creative class. We have a huge problem, and it is not enough to be theoretically radical, because we have Foucault in any fucking catalog of any even watercolor exhibition. You know, there's a exhibition about flowers or like views of Venice, and there's Deleuze in the catalog, there's Foucault, and so on. And this is something, of course, this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity, but at the same time, we miss the strength that in '68, for example, this global movement, of course, had to have an effective and real impact on the institutional architecture of art. Really, last thing, another. I know I'm giving problems and not trying to provide you with answers. The next project, so because also you invited us to give some example of the work that we do. Our next project, which will start in 2 weeks, is titled Nationalist Pavilion. It's not a pavilion, it's an independent week in which there will be the artists having 2 workshops on the issue of borders or migrations and so on. So these are not curated directly by Sale Docs, by 3 very young Italian curators, and I think very interesting Italian curators. And the workshops will be open, will be free, and being about migrations, what we're trying to achieve is that also political refugees, which are now based in Venice, can join us, can work with us. Also people from the community of stranger people that are living in Venice can join us. But we really want to avoid the exotic effect. We really want to avoid to be politically correct. So the fact that there are three guys of color and working together with the kind of white political artists, which teaches them art as a kind of charity operation. So it's not charity that we are looking for, but what we are looking for is to build ties, to build social ties. So we are here. So there is this kind of community-based project, but Sale stays here. Sale is a part of this community, let's call it, again, community in lack of a better word, is part of this city. And what we want to achieve with this week of workshops is that hopefully the artists will do a good job, meaning that their work will have a subjective impact on the people which will participate in the workshops. But at the same time, we want to build social ties with refugees, with migrants, and having Sale as a place which is active in the city, which stays in the city, which can be a point of reference for a political construction, for the construction of a political relationship which lasts beyond the week of the seminar. So I'm closing, and thank you very much for organizing